There is a person watching this video right now. You know who you are. You have sat in church your whole life and felt like something in your brain simply would not cooperate. The mind moves too fast. The thoughts scatter. You genuinely love Yahweh, but staying present through a full sermon sometimes feels like holding water in your hands. You act before you think, then live with the consequences, then do it again. And somewhere along the way, a doctor, a teacher, a parent, a child gave you a word for it: ADHD.
And there is a second person watching this video. You love someone wired that way. A child, a grandchild, someone you have prayed for, stayed up at night worrying about, advocated for in every room. And you have watched the church struggle to know what to do with them. This teaching is for both of you, in equal measure. Here is what this video is, and what it is not. It is not a clinical video. It is not a diagnosis. It is not medical advice. No one in the scriptures was assessed by a 21st century clinician. What this is a Hebrew word study, a close, careful look at two men whose behavioral patterns mirror, in striking ways, what we now recognize as ADHD. And the Hebrew scriptures already had precise words for those patterns thousands of years before any clinical manual tried to name them. What Yahweh says about those patterns is not what the church has typically told people like you. Stay with me.
The two men we are going inside today are Samson and David. They lived centuries apart. One was a judge raised to deliver Israel. One was a shepherd boy who became its greatest king. On the surface, they look nothing alike. But when you read their stories carefully, a profile emerges that is almost impossible to overlook. Both were called by Yahweh before they were born. Both carried an unusual measure of gifting. Both moved through the world with an intensity, a speed, an emotional depth that set them apart from every person around them. Both made decisions in a heartbeat that took years to undo. Both felt everything more deeply than other people seemed to. And yet, their lives ended in completely different places. Samson died blind, in chains, inside a pagan temple. David died as the king Yahweh covenanted with forever, the king whose name would carry Israel's hope all the way to Yeshua the Messiah. Same wiring, radically different outcomes. What is the difference between a Samson life and a David life? That is what the Hebrew is going to show us.
To understand Samson, we cannot start with Delilah. We have to start with his birth. Before Samson was conceived, an angel appeared to his mother with specific instructions. These instructions were structured around something called the Nazirite vow, and the Hebrew root of the word Nazirite carries more than most people realize. Nazir, set apart, consecrated, from root Nazar, to dedicate. But here is what most teachers do not mention. That same root gives us another Hebrew word: Nezer, crown, consecration, the mark of royalty and divine designation. A Nazirite was, in the full weight of the Hebrew, a crowned person. Set apart not merely for discipline, but for a calling that carried royal designation. Numbers 6:7 itself uses the word Nezer directly of the Nazirite. The Nezer of his God is upon his head. And this crowned designation came with 3 protective boundaries.
Number 6 gives the full structure. No wine, no grapes, no cutting the hair, no contact with the dead. These were not decorative rules. They were scaffolding, external structure placed around a life that Yahweh knew would need it from the outside. And there is one more detail in Judges 13:5 that most people miss. Judges 13:5. He shall begin to deliver Israel from the hand of the Philistines. Begin. Not complete, not finish. Begin. Samson's calling was always initiatory. He was not given a mandate to single-handedly defeat the Philistines. He was given a mandate to start something, to create a fracture in an oppressive system that others would widen after him. This matters when we look at how his story ends.
Now watch carefully, because the dismantling of Samson's protective structure did not begin with Delilah. It began in Judges 14. On his way to Timnah, Samson had earlier killed a lion with his bare hands. When he passes the same spot again, he notices something in the carcass. A swarm of bees has made honey inside it, and Samson reaches into the dead body to scoop out the honey. He eats it as he walks. Numbers 6 verse 6, he must not go near a dead body. That is a direct violation of the Nazirite vow. And Judges 14:9 records that he did not tell his parents where the honey came from. He knew what he had done, and he kept moving. Then in Judges 14:10, Samson hosts what the text calls a mishte, a week-long drinking feast. Numbers 6:3 prohibits Nazirites from all wine and grape products. Whether or not Samson personally drank, the very act of hosting a wine feast broke the protective boundary of the vow.
This is the pattern of impulsivity without an anchor. Not catastrophic failure all at once. Small compromises that seem to cost nothing, each one making the next one easier. The vow eroding piece by piece, long before Delilah ever sat across from him. This is not presented as condemnation. The pattern described here is the same pattern that characterizes impulsive behavior in any era. Small decisions made under stimulus, each one feeling manageable, until one finally is not. Samson is not uniquely wicked. He is human, without a return mechanism.
Bahal, H926. To act rashly, be hasty in heart, move before the mind has processed, from a root meaning to be agitated, disturbed, driven. Ecclesiastes 5:2. Solomon writes, "Do not be rash with your mouth, and do not let your heart be hasty to utter a word before God. For God is in heaven, and you are on earth. Therefore, let your words be few." The word translated rash in the first line is Bahal. The word translated hasty in the second line is also Bahal. Solomon uses it twice in the same verse, in parallel, for emphasis. The mouth moves before the mind finishes. The heart commits before wisdom has spoken. Proverbs 28:22 uses the same root. A man who hastens after riches has an evil eye. The one being driven by urgency rather than choosing it. Samson, throughout Judges, is the living illustration of Bahal. Judges 14:1. He sees a Philistine woman in Timnah, and the text says, she pleased his eyes. He walks home and tells his parents, "Get her for me. She is right in my eyes." The Hebrew phrase is yashra be'enai, She is straight right in my sight. A decision made entirely on the weight of what the eye caught in a single moment. No consultation, no process, no pause. He makes a riddle bet at his wedding feast on pure impulse. He kills 30 men in Ashkelon to pay the debt when he loses it. He burns the Philistines' grain fields in a rage response to a personal slight. He carries the gates of Gaza off their hinges in the middle of the night. Every one of these is a Bahal act. Every one escalates harder than the situation requires.
Shagah, H7686. To wander, stray, be drawn off course. Can also carry the sense of being pulled, as if intoxicated by what captures the eye. Proverbs 5:19-20. Let her breasts fill you at all times with delight. Be intoxicated always in her love. Why would you be intoxicated, my son, with a forbidden woman? The word translated intoxicated in both lines is Shagah. The mind that Shagahs is not indifferent or lazy. It is magnetized. It follows the pull of whatever is brightest, most intense, most immediately stimulating in its environment, before the will has a chance to redirect it. Ezekiel 34:6 uses the same root for sheep without a shepherd. My flock wandered through all the mountains. They are not going nowhere. They are being pulled everywhere. Samson's entire arc in Judges is a Shagah arc. His calling was precise and specific. He knew what he was set apart for. But again and again, something external caught him. A woman, an offense, a challenge, and pulled him off the road. Not because he did not have a destination, because the Shagah in him was stronger than the anchor holding him to it. Then we reach one of the most arresting scenes in all of Scripture. Delilah has extracted the secret of the hair. The Philistines have seized him. They have put out his eyes. They have bound him with bronze chains. They are leading him through the temple of Dagon to be displayed and mocked in front of thousands celebrating his destruction. But his hair has begun to grow back. Samson, blind and chained, asks a servant to place his hands on the supporting pillars. And then he prays. Judges 16:28. Yahweh Adonai, remember me. Please strengthen me just this once, O God, that I may be avenged on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. The man who spent his life moving too fast, deciding too quickly, being pulled off course by everything that caught his eye, is completely still. No distractions, no options, no stimulation. Just the weight of the pillars under his hands and the name of Yahweh on his lips. And Yahweh answered.
Samson had been called to begin a deliverance. And in his final act, blind and stripped of everything, he completed the beginning. More Philistines fell in his death than in all his life. This is not a message that the impulsive life is fine as long as it ends in sacrifice. The cost Samson paid was catastrophic and real. It is a message about the length of Yahweh's patience, and about what happens when everything that has been pulling a person is finally gone, and only the name of Yahweh remains.
David's wiring is not softer than Samson's. It is equally intense. And before we get to the hope in David's story, I need to show you the recognition. Because the most powerful thing about David is not what he looked like at his best. It is what he looked like when the wiring was pulling him in the wrong direction. 2 Samuel 11. Spring of the year. The season when kings go out to battle. David sent his army and stayed home. He arose from his afternoon rest as evening came and walked on the roof of the palace. He looked out and saw a woman bathing. She was very beautiful. And in the time it takes to send a servant to find out who she was, the decision was already forming. He sent for her. What followed was not a single impulsive act. It was a cascade of Bahal decisions, each one covering the last. Deception, the abuse of power, the arranged death of an innocent man. A life unraveling one fast decision at a time. The same pattern we saw in Samson. The eye caught something. The impulse moved before the wisdom. The Shagah pulled, and the Bahal followed.
Then 2 Samuel 24. David decided to number the fighting men of Israel and Judah. The census was completed, and only after the count was done did his heart strike him. 2 Samuel 24:10. David's heart struck him after he had numbered the people. And David said to Yahweh, I have sinned greatly in what I have done. That is the timing of impulsive recognition. Not before, not during, after. When everything has already moved and the weight of it finally lands. If you carry this wiring, you know that timing intimately. You have sat with that hollow feeling after the words were already out of your mouth. After the decision was already made. After the thing you knew was wrong was already done. You recognize the moment when the heart strikes. Now, I want to show you what David did in that moment, and in every moment like it across his entire life. Lev, H3820, heart, not primarily sentiment, but the seat of will, thought, and directional intention. 1 Samuel 16:7. Man looks at the outward appearance, but Yahweh looks at the lev. When we read this in English, we hear Yahweh looks at your feelings, not your actions. But the Hebrew lev is not primarily an emotional category. It is a volitional one. The lev is your direction, your orientation, the compass of your inner life. Proverbs 4:23 says, Guard your lev with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life. Guard it. The command assumes the lev can drift. It assumes the compass can be pulled off true north by what it encounters. The command is not feel the right things. It is watch which direction your will is pointed. Yahweh was not telling Samuel that David had the right emotions. He was telling Samuel that David's inner compass was pointed at something real. And more critically, that when it drifted, which it did, catastrophically, it came back.
Shuv, to turn, return, reorient. The root concept behind the full theology of Teshuvah. This is the concept that finally separates Samson from David. Not perfection,
not absence of impulsivity, not superior self-discipline. Return. The Hebrew root shuv means to turn back, to reorient toward a source you moved away from. The prophets and later scripture would develop this root into the full theology of teshuvah, the return. But the action of turning back is woven through David's story from beginning to end.
After Bathsheba, Nathan confronted David, and David's response was immediate. Psalm 51:10. Create in me a clean heart, O Elohim, and renew a right spirit within me. The word translated right there is nahon, established, firm, prepared. David is not asking for a different personality. He is not asking Yahweh to make him calmer or more focused or less intense. He is asking for his lev to be reestablished in the right direction. Compass reset.
And after the census, the same pattern. David confessed, received the prophet Gad's word, built an altar at the threshing floor, and Yahweh relented. A different event, the same shuv. And 1 Samuel 13:14, long before any of the failures we have named, Yahweh had already said it. 1 Samuel 13:14, Yahweh has sought out a man after his own heart. Not a man with a perfect record, a man after his own heart. The shuv pattern is documented across the Psalms. Psalm 13, Psalm 22, Psalm 32, Psalm 51. Again and again, the compass drifts, and again, it turns back. That is not weakness. That is the defining characteristic of a life Yahweh called after his own heart.
Pazaz, H6339, to leap, spring, burst with kinetic energy. Peel, active leaping, 2 Samuel 6:16. Call, arms made agile by divine power, Genesis 49:24. Now, I want to show you the same wiring in its highest expression. 2 Samuel 6:14-16. The Ark of the Covenant is being brought back to Jerusalem. In verse 14, David dances before Yahweh with all his might. By verse 16, when Bahal looks out from the window, she sees him leaping and dancing before Yahweh. The Hebrew verb is mepazez, from the root pazaz. It is not restrained movement. It is not dignified movement. It is explosive, full-body, uncontainable expression. His wife, Michal, watched from the window and despised him in her heart. The king was making a spectacle of himself. Too much, too undignified. 2 Samuel 6:21-22. It was before Yahweh, who chose me above your father and all his house. I will celebrate before Yahweh. I will become even more undignified than this. David did not apologize for the Pazaz. He contextualized it. Before Yahweh. Those two words are the entire answer. The energy was not suppressed. It was not managed into stillness. It was directed. Before Yahweh. Genesis 49:24 uses the same root in a different form. Jacob's blessing over Joseph speaks of his arms being made agile, vayafazu, by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. There the call form carries a passive meaning, the arms made capable by what they are anchored to. In 2 Samuel, the PL form carries the active meaning, energy leaping outward in full expression. Same root, two sides of the same truth. When Pazaz is aimed at Yahweh, it produces one of the most vivid images of worship in the entire Hebrew Bible. When it has no before Yahweh, no anchor point, it becomes the engine of the Bathsheba sequence and the census. This is the same person, the same intensity, the same speed, the same inability to contain what is inside. The only variable is what the lev is pointed at.
Now, I want to speak directly to the person who has carried this wiring their whole life. The portrait you just heard is not a condemnation. It is a recognition. The Hebrew scriptures saw you long before any clinical framework tried to name what you carry. They saw the Bahal urgency, the Shagah pull, the Pazaz that cannot stay contained. And they did not call any of it disqualifying. They called it human, and they showed Yahweh working through it. Here is what strikes me most about these two men. They both returned to Yahweh. Samson returned at the very end, when the eyes were gone, when the hair was gone, when the years were gone, and the calling looked like it had been wasted entirely. One prayer, one moment of total stillness, and Yahweh answered. David returned throughout his entire life, again and again and again. The compass drifting and coming back, across decades and failures and consequences he could not undo. One return at the very end of everything. One return woven through everything. Both honored. Both used. Both called by Yahweh to something that outlasted their worst moments. That means the return is available to you wherever you are standing right now. If you feel like Samson, like the damage is done and the years cannot be recovered, Yahweh answered at the end. If you feel like David, in the middle of the journey, drifting and returning and drifting again, Yahweh honors that too. The church has often responded to this kind of mind with a simple message. Slow down, sit still, be more disciplined, pray harder, focus longer. And for the person wired this way, that message has carried an undertone that became a wound. That Yahweh made you wrong. The Hebrew scriptures do not say that. They say that the man who leaped and danced until his wife was ashamed of him was called a man after Yahweh's own heart. They say that Yahweh built protective structure around Samson before birth because he already knew this man would need it from the outside. They say that the compass of the lev matters more than the perfection of the path. You are not disqualified. You never were too much. The question the Hebrew asks is not whether Yahweh can use this wiring. He already has, repeatedly. The question is what your lev is pointed at, and whether you know how to return when it drifts. And to the parent or grandparent watching this, the child you are lying awake praying for is not broken. What you are holding is Pazaz that has not yet found its before Yahweh. Bahal that has not yet learned Shuv. Energy that has not yet found what it is for. Tell them about Samson at the pillars. Tell them about David dancing without apology. Tell them that Yahweh has a long and consistent history of doing his most decisive work
through people whose minds moved faster than the world around them knew what to do with. Your most important job is not to quiet the energy. It is to help them find what the energy is pointed at, and to teach them early that the return is the thing, not the absence of drift. The compass coming back after failure. That is what Yahweh honors. If you carry this wiring, the invitation today is not to manage yourself into stillness. It is to tend your lev more intentionally than you tend your behavior. Behavior without lev work is the Samson pattern. External structure that holds until it does not. Rules without the compass beneath them. Lev work is honest and simple. It is asking, when everything else falls away and the distractions are gone, what am I actually returning to? Not, did I perform well today? Not, did I stay focused? But what is my compass pointing at? That return, however imperfect, however many times repeated, is the pattern of Shuv. And it is enough. David did not achieve it once. He achieved it for a lifetime. And Yahweh called it after his own heart. Now, if you or someone you love has received a clinical diagnosis of ADHD, this teaching is a theological lens, not a replacement for the professional support, community, and care that may be part of your journey. Yahweh works through the ancient text and through the present moment, both. If you love someone wired this way, the most powerful thing you can do is give them a theological framework before the world gives them a shame framework. Shame says, you are too much. You are broken. You need to be quieter, calmer, smaller. The Hebrew says, you carry Pazaz. The question is what it is before. Build structure around them the way Yahweh built it around Samson before birth, not as punishment, as protection. External scaffolding is not a sign that someone is defective. It is what Yahweh himself provided for one of the most supernaturally gifted people in all of Scripture. And teach them Shuv early. Teach them that the return is the mark of a David life, not the absence of failure. The compass coming back after failure. That is what Yahweh honors. If this teaching opened something for you today, I want to give you a resource that will take you deeper into the Hebrew names of Yahweh. It is called the 7 Hidden Names of God. 7 Hebrew names that most believers have never encountered. Each one reveals something specific about how Yahweh sees you personally. It is free and it is linked in the description below. Thousands of people from this community have already downloaded it. And if you are not yet subscribed to this channel, now is the time. There is a body of Hebrew word study here that goes as deep as you are willing to go. We began with 2 people. The person who has always felt too much, and the person who loves them. Let me leave you with this. Yahweh did not design the sanctuary only for the minds that stay perfectly still. He designed it to receive whatever you bring through the door, including the racing thoughts, including the restless body, including the Pazaz that does not know what to do with itself until it finds something worthy to be before. David did not calm down before he danced. He danced because of what he was dancing before. Samson did not achieve perfect composure before he prayed. He prayed because everything else was finally gone, and only the name of Yahweh was left.
Two men, same wiring, both returned to Yahweh. Yahweh is not waiting for you to slow down. He is waiting for your lev to turn. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. I will see you in the next one.